Uh, Dear students, today we are going to have a discussion on the growth and evolution of political theory. In the last few classes, you learned about what is theory, what is political theory, and also the scope of political theory. Under the scope, we had a brief discussion about the evolution of political theory to know its ever expanding scope. But today, the growth and evolution of political theory is a little bit more deeper and deeper. The growth and evolution of political theory uh, should be understood in the context of how it began and how the the focus has been shifting of the political theory. The growth and evolution of political theory is broadly divided into three is broadly divided into three phases: classical political theory, modern political theory, and contemporary political theory. The Let us have a look at what is classical political theory and on which aspects it emphasized, and also who were the great thinkers, political thinkers of that era. The classical political theory, it was developed during ancient Greek period. The ancient Greek period, in the ancient Greek period, there used to be many city states. The city state was known as, in Greek language, polis, Polis, polis. Polis means ancient Greek city state. The the study of ancient this city state was known as politics. That is how the political theory began during ancient period in Greek cities during 6th and 5th century BC. The great political thinkers of that era were Plato and Aristotle. And Plato, in his book Republic, said the that the ultimate aim of the political inquiry was to have an ideal state and also philosopher king, and how justice should prevail. He speculated on the concept of justice, and his ambition, his aim was to establish an ideal state where justice would prevail. And his disciple Aristotle is known as the father of political science, because he was the person who systematically started who started systematic study of so many Greek city states. He studied almost 158 and above city states. He compared one system of government of the one Greek city state with another Greek city state. And he said that the state is created to look after the needs of the man, not only to look after the needs of the man, but also to make the man the best citizen, an ideal citizen. That is how he said in his book, the famous book Politics. So the Plato and Aristotle, their emphasis was on, you know, ethics, because human being after all is an ethical animal. So therefore their emphasis was on ethical aspects, values and ideals. And also Aristotle compared the different systems of government that were there in ancient Greek city state. The ancient Greek culture was very restless during the time. There were many, disorders, and he also speculated on, revolution, the reasons for revolution, and how to face the revolution. He speculated on those aspects, and also Aristotle compared, different systems of governments. Democracy, polity, and monarchy. He favored midway. He favored neither democracy nor monarchy, but he favored polity, which combined the main important characteristic features of democracy and monarchy. So this was how the classical political theory began. The main emphasis was on ideals and ethics, and their orientation was philosophical. This till 15th century, the emphasis of political inquiry, the emphasis of political theory was on what ought to be, and the philosophical orientation. Modern political theory began in 15th century with the publication of the great work of Nicholas Machiavelli, The Prince. Why should we call a modern? Here, the modern means uh, the apart from emphasizing on values and mm, ethics, the for the first time, Nicholas Machiavelli in his book The Prince emphasized on he emphasized on separation of ethics and religion from political activity. He advised the king the ways, the ways and means, and different strategies to protect the state and expand the state, and also the values or the morals and ethics, and also religion can be exploited for the sake of state. That is how he emphasized on a purely political aspects, and he separated politics from values and religion. That is how modern state started. Modern means it is something, a kind of rational inquiry. Humanity was the main emphasis, and also rationality was the main emphasis. Without having without having subscribing, without having any favor towards the ethics and philosophy. Early modern phase, and this modern political theory can also be broadly divided into a different dynamics, different phases. Early modern phase, and you also have later modern phase, and behavioral phase, post behavioral phase, and Marxist political theory. um, Early modern phase. The early modern period was between 1500 AD to 1789 AD. That is 16th century to 18th century. In the early modern period, just now as I have said, Nicholas Machiavelli wrote the book Prince. Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, they were the social contract philosophers. They emphasized on how the state is created by the contract being entered into by the people, and also Montesquieu and Rousseau. These are all liberal political intellectuals. The Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, and Rousseau are known as contractualists. Contractualists are those philosophers who speculated on how the people enter into contract and create the state. So that is why they say That is why they are called as contractualists. The common themes were sovereignty, why a state should have sovereign power. Thomas Hobbes said state should have absolute sovereignty, and the state, natural rights. John Locke, speculated on natural rights and political obligation. Why people should obey the state? What was the necessity? And these philosophers also emphasized on republican type of governments, apart from which is different from the hereditary kingship, and also constitutionalism. John Locke is famously known for constitutionalism. Constitutionalism here means the state and the government should be governed by certain fixed rules and regulations, which are enshrined in the constitution. The constitution ensures the limited sovereignty and also protection for the rights of the people. So these are the main themes during early modern phase, uh, and modern phase after 1789. 1789, you should be knowing that it is the year of French Revolution. During the French Revolution, the most important values, equality, liberty, and fraternity, were the main values that were emphasized. And the main thinkers of this era were Edmund Burke, Karl Marx, J.S. Mill, and Friedrich Nietzsche. The common themes were liberty, equality, nationalism, how nationalism emerged after the decline of feudalism, and capitalism. Uh, how after the decline of capitalism, after the decline of the feudalism, capitalism has emerged. Here, capitalism means the means of production, like factories, land, or in the hands of the rich, and they can earn as much profit as possible, and they can accumulate the property as much as they want. So that is what happens under capitalism. So in the capitalism, only a few benefited, and that resulted in a lot of discontent, and there were so many limitations, there were so many gaps, there were so many mismatches in capitalism that resulted in demand for socialism. Socialism, provides for the nationalization of the means of production, so the when means of production are not in a few hands, then equality to some extent is possible. And also democracy. So that was the after industrial revolution, the capitalism came into existence, and during the time the democracy, the movement for democracy also started after 1789, after French Revolution. So these were the main common themes, or main aspects on which political theory concentrated. Um then behavioralism, and till early 19 late 1920s, the emphasis was on what ought to be, and the emphasis was on state, the emphasis was on government. So there was emphasis on institutions like state and government. The political inquiry after the behavioralism began in late 1920s, there was a huge dissatisfaction with the traditional normative approach. The traditional inquiry was normative, and it emphasized on what ought to be, but it missed what actually is. And therefore, after the influence of the natural sciences, behavioralism has begun, especially with the publication of Easton's book, The Political System, in 1953. uh, no longer associated with the state or the government. Now the emphasis was on activities, the emphasis was on processes, the emphasis was on behavior. So behavioralism concentrates, emphasizes, focuses on behavior of the persons who are involved with the exercising of power, and also as citizens, as voters. So the behavioralism emphasized on activities, processes, and behavior, because scientific study is possible only with regard to these activities. With regard to values, scientific study is not possible. Uh, People say, and especially positivists believe. Uh, the what Especially David Easton activities, like what David Easton calls authoritative allocation of values within a society. So the preferences are allocated by the state, by legitimacy. Here authoritative means the acceptance of the people. The values are allocated with the acceptance of the people in a society. How certain values are being imposed and they are legitimized. So how the government and the state involves those activities have become very important. What Robert Dahl says, the power, rule, or authority. Um, Publication of Graham Wallace, Human Nature in Politics, and Bentley's The Process of Government. These all show the emphasis on activities, behavior, and processes. So there was a shift from institutional structure to activities, processes, and behavior. The facts and data constitute the basis of study. What is regarded as more important than what ought to be. Regularities of human behavior was to be expressed in generalizations. So when you study the activities, processes, or behavior over a period of time or a particular time during the regularities, there are some given or regular patterns, and based on those regular patterns, they try to arrive at some generalizations. So for this, no, to arrive at regularities, to arrive at general rules, rigorous testing and quantitative procedures became commonplace in an effort to systematize the study of social behavior into science. A theory of knowledge based on science, grounded in observation through senses, sense organs. There are 5 sense organs. So based on through those sense organs, observation is done, and that knowledge that is produced based on observation through sense organs is known as positivism. So the behavioralists emphasized on knowing what it is. For that, they emphasized on so many methodologies. They emphasized on so many techniques. So that is how behavioralism, brought a revolutionary change in the inquiry of the political theory. And political theory is sought to be made a kind of science through behavioralism. And this is one phase. But after 1960s, again David Easton, who was a great behavioralist, uh, by publishing his book in 1953. In 1969, he initiated post-behavioral view in political theory. Post-behaviorism is a kind of behavioralism. It emphasizes on values, the values and responsibilities. The emphasize It emphasizes, post-behavioralism emphasizes less on the scientific method and empiricism, and more stress on public responsibilities, which are loaded. Here loaded means which have certain priorities. So post-behavioralism, it combined values with that of facts. So, and the another important, as I have been telling, The shift of focus from strict methodological issues. The behavioralism emphasized on methodologies to a great concern. But now post-behavioralism, it emphasizes on responsibilities and also methodological issues. Now, another important phase of modern political theory is Marxist political theory. It is a method of interpreting the past. It is understanding the present and projecting the future. So its interpretation is having a certain purpose. The purpose is to change the society. The entire Marxist philosophy believes that society, is society is having certain classes, two classes, rich and the poor. And in the capitalist society, the poor are exploited to the maximum extent, and the poor proletariat will come together and dislodge the capitalist system. And it emphasizes on change, revolutionary change through class struggle, and seeks transformation from capitalistic to socialistic and from socialistic to communistic mode of production. Here, capitalism to socialism. Socialism emphasizes on equality and means of production, socialization of means of production, so that the wealth is not concentrated in a few hands. And from that socialism, it turns out to be communistic mode of production. Communistic mode of production means the means of production are completely in the hands of the society, and there are no rich and poor differentiation, and the private property is abolished. Then a communistic mode of production would result in. That is what Marxist political theory believes in. About Marxism and its philosophy, you will come to know, you will learn in your next semester, that is second semester. So as of now, a Marxist political theory as a part of modern political theory is entirely a different theory, is entirely a new orientation, an alternative to the then or now existing political theories. Uh, According to Marxist point of view, politics is not fundamental activity of human beings. What is fundamental activity of human beings according to Marxism? It is production. Production activity is fundamental. So the politics and political system, legal system, culture, they are all secondary. The primary thing is the production and production relations of production and means of production are the basis of the society, based on which politics, political system, legal system, depend. And the political system is not an autonomous structure, because as it cannot be studied in isolation from the rest of the society. That is the perception of Marxist philosophy. So under modern political theory, we studied early modern period, that is from 16th century to 18th century, and also later modern phase that began in 1789 with French Revolution, uh, and uh, and also we studied behavioralism, post-behavioralism, how behavioralism emphasized on methodologies, how it emphasized on knowing the activities, behavior, and processes. Um, and also we had a discussion on Marxist political theory. So these are the parts of modern political theory. Now, contemporary, let us see contemporary political theory. A contemporary political theory has been in existence since 1970s. After 1970s, now so many changes have come throughout the world. So much of technology has come, communication technology has come after 1970s, and also the globalization, because of the integration of the world economies. A lot of world trade happened, and the tariffs, import and export, taxes were reduced, so that the trade should take place across the nations without any hindrance. So much of globalization has started, according to David Hell. So in this context, the political theory, you know, uh, has to be very careful, and its activity, diverged into many aspects, and political this entire changes in the world have made the complexity, the social situation very complex. So in this context, David Hell said the contemporary political theory in totality involves four distinct tasks. Traditionally it has been philosophical. We learned it was ideal, it is philosophical, and also it is empirical. With the behavioral revolution, how political theory became empirical, that we have discussed now, just now. And historical political theory is also historical, as Saban said, because history is very important. And also it is strategic. So strategic in the sense where the political theory is now and where it has to go, in which direction it should go. So it should be strategic, therefore. Um, then um, now the globalization, in the context of globalization, the political inquiry on nation state, on nation and government structures, you know the traditional political theory and modern political theory up to 1970s emphasized on nation state and its problems, and also the concepts within the nation state. But after globalization and technology, transnationalism. So now all entire world has so many problems. So we have to think globally. So in terms of global justice, global citizenship, and also trends against them. Till from 1970s to 2010 or 8, the globalization, there was continuously, globalization happened. But after 2010, now the trends are against globalization, in the sense the nation states are imposing so many tariffs, and they are thinking in terms of their own national interest. And we can have the best example, Brexit, and the American policies, which are aimed at protecting their national interest and imposing so many restrictions on international trade. So these are the trends that we have been experiencing. So there have been even these trends against globalization. Globalization has been taking place because of the technology, because of the strong base that has been laid for the last 30 years. So we have both the trends. On the one side, there is a clamor for globalization, and also the counter globalization forces have have caught the strength. Uh, the main thinkers of this period included were John Rawls. John Rawls wrote a book in 1970, The Theory of Justice. Robert Nozick, Mikhail Foucault, Jürgen Habermas, etc. The common themes of the contemporary political theory are free market, gender, culture, identity, multiculturalism, diversity, and global justice. Rawls' theory of justice represents a convergence of liberalism, egalitarianism, and justice. Uh, the emergence of new concerns like feminism, environmentalism, ethnicity, racial identity, equality, and diversity has led to a general loss of central focus regarding the subject matter and consensus about methodologies. And because of this huge changes, because of this huge complexity, the political theory has lost, seems to have lost no central focus because of this huge complexity. Um, it is for this reason and to bring about a new unity, the theoretical focus of the discipline, that Easton announced in the 1990s the beginning of a new behavioralism. Again, emphasizing on methodologies to have a kind of identity to the inquiry of political theory. So that is how the political theory and its evolution should be studied under the broad three phases, uh, under classical political theory, modern political theory, and also contemporary political theory. Under modern political theory, we discussed the early phase of modernity and the later phase of modernity, and also behavioralism, post-behavioralism, and Marxist perspective. So under modern political theory, we should concentrate on those five aspects. And contemporary political theory, the complexity, the nation state has been replaced with the transnationalism and globalization, and anti forces of globalization and anti forces of globalization should be emphasized on. So this is how the evolution of political theory has has happened. Thank you very much.